Hi everybody, I'm joined by Adam and we're back for another episode of Fragrantica Talks. And today we're going to be talking about citrus fragrances and citrus fragrances that we really like or we find interesting for some reason. Now, I wanted to start, Adam, by asking you, what problems do you think there are with citrus fragrances?
Well, I think there are problems that aren't the fault of the fragrances themselves in most cases. I think the problem is that they're misunderstood. I think we tend to look at them in a certain way and expect certain things from them in terms of their performance and in terms of their profile, uh, when the category actually has a lot more diversity to offer than what we might expect. Um, I'm assuming, though, that you're meaning the specific things in terms of their longevity or supposed longevity or lack thereof. And I'm assuming that you probably also mean that sometimes they can be a little one-dimensional in their profile, depending on how they're rendered and what they're paired with. They can be a little bit humdrum and expected. And
Yeah, so I suppose they can feel a little bit like we've smelled them before and there's not much new there at times. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was, what non-citrus notes do you think are often associated with citrus fragrances? And are there any of those that you particularly like?
yes and yes. Well, yeah, that's a great question. Fascinating way to think of it. I think cypress and like airier woods, maybe something like an ISOE super, something like cypress or what's the wood I'm thinking of? I believe it's Ho wood, HO wood, like woods that are airier, lighter. Whether they're a specific species of woods that are trying to be represented in the fragrance, or whether it's something like a grouping of aroma chemicals that smells airy and woody, like some woody amber materials or ISOE super. I think those tend to be paired often with citruses, even if we don't necessarily stop to think about that. Um, More specifically, I think herbs and golden florals I associate with citruses, like orange blossom, right? Because orange blossom is sort of the backbone of eau de colognes, which also star citruses in the front row. And then herbs also tend to find their way into citric and citrus perfumes, whether they are eau de cologne style with herbs included in that profile, or whether they are, not necessarily eau de colognes, but they're, citrus and herbs and aromatics. So things like that are the types of notes that I associate most with citruses that aren't necessarily citric.
Mm, yeah. So yeah, I thought something similar. Actually, and so I'd written down cypress and rosemary. I often notice that in citrus perfumes, and then geranium's another one that I do sometimes notice because it brings, or it kind of seems to amplify the sourness that we might expect from citrus fragrances. So I'll be interested to see if any of those come up in our discussion today. So do you want to talk us through the method that we've deployed today, just to that we talked about we're going to do this slightly differently.
Yeah, so we have like a little thing at the end. So we because I think we're all about like challenging some of the associations that we form with fragrance and specific types of fragrance notes. I think we were keen on just sort of breaking down this category in a way that you might not expect. And to me, that involves challenging one of the key central notions about citrus fragrances insofar as they're assumed not to last very long, right? Like citrus notes in perfumery tend to be the things that burn bright and burn fast. They're gone in an hour or less off the skin, and they are like that high energy, bright, bracing material or class of materials, and that's all well and good, and I can see why those associations form because many citrus materials, whether they're natural or synthetic, do not last very long on the skin or on the clothes. And many citrus notes have this quality rather of enlivening and brightness and sort of a forged association for themselves that is very high energy. All of those things are very true and in a generalized way, but I think my notion at least is that you can do much more with citrus materials than just those what those restrictions imply, and that they can last a long time on the skin if they're blended correctly, and if certain types of materials are used to pair with them. And certainly there are a couple of citrus materials that are very citrusy in and of themselves that last a long time too. So it really depends on who you are as a perfumer and who you are as a consumer of perfumes. And I thought it would be fun to spray each of the fragrances we're going to talk about on blotters a few hours ago, right? We're recording this in my afternoon, Nicola's evening, and I sprayed these around 9 o'clock this morning. So I wanted to challenge the assumption that all citrus fragrances are a certain way, and I chose perfumes that not only last a good deal on skin too, but that do something a little bit different with the category as well. So I thought it'd be kind of fun just to sort of see like, oh, this is the way they smell hours later. And do they retain anything citrusy about themselves? And how has that citrusy element at the start that's so very strong evolved in the composition? So I thought that'd be kind of fun to do. And I don't think I've seen many review categories of citrus perfumes do that. So I thought it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Awesome. And so, yeah, it's a bit of an experiment for us as well. So with that in mind, do you want to kick us off with your first selection?
Yeah, let's do it. So yeah, like I said, I used to be kind of, I don't want to say bored by the category, but a little underwhelmed. So if you're not overwhelmed and you're not underwhelmed, are you just whelmed? I think I heard that in a recent episode of the Leodorans podcast. So I thought that was funny. So from an early stage of my perfume interest, I realized the importance of citruses in fragrance. And I think many people do eventually realize that. They're in chypres, they're in fougères, they're in eau de colognes, they're in, you can find bergamot in just about any thing, really. I mean, they're all over the place. So I think we tend to downplay their diversity and capability in perfume. So I wanted to choose something that was immediately right off the bat a little different for as a citrus perfume in and of itself. And I had to choose something from the house of Atelier Cologne for that purpose. Now, I do want to say I'm very frustrated with Atelier Cologne right now. Not only did they discontinue my favorite fragrance of theirs, and certainly one of my favorite fragrances, full stop, which is Iris Rebelle. They also seem to have pulled out of all of their brick and mortar locations that used to be scattered throughout the United States. They had a couple of beautiful locations in New York that are no longer there. And so we're all kind of wondering, or fans of the house are all kind of wondering, like, what are you doing, Atelier Cologne? And they've been bought up by a very large company. So that confusion aside, I can't help but give them the credit that they do deserve. They're notably really strong in the citrus category. And where most citrus smells like, the dawn, morning, something you put on to start your day because it's high energy, very bracing. Something that I think a very high seller of theirs, Clementine, California, does is it kind of smells more relaxing and more lower key and more like not the dawn, but more like dusk, like it's getting dark outside. Shadows have fallen, right? This is a fancier, like I think anniversary edition bottle of it. It's the scent is exactly the same as the standard bottles of it, but to me, it is a nighttime citrus, which is not something you hear of very often. Now, it would perform very well in the office during the day, with typical daytime associations. Not to take that away from it, it would do very well in those situations. But more pragmatically, I'd say that it smells like a mellow citrus forward take on the eau de cologne genre with some laid back, kind of herby and spicy notes like juniper and cypress wood and black pepper. There's even an anise note listed. I do not think it smells like anise very much. So if you're very afraid of those kinds of notes, don't worry about that. And then there's this cool water, not the fragrance cool water, but cool, tepid, wateriness about it. That kind of comes in the form of like an early 90s boisterous masculine, except instead of it smelling like that screechy eau de cologne from the 90s, it smells like you sprayed that on a sweatshirt and left it baking in the sun for like a few weeks so that you can just smell a vague hint of it But it smells like at that level, kind of dialed in and tuned in at that level throughout the entirety of the wear. So I think that's really cool and unexpected. It has like, the bottle is blue in this case, and the regular bottle has like a light blue coloration on it. But to me, it smells like that. It smells like an aquatic blue. If you like that Arquiste aquatic perfume, Sydney Rock Pool, you'll probably like Clementine, California if you haven't tried it. It's a little bit has a little bit more going on in it, certainly more citrus forward and certainly more herbaceous than the Arquiste fragrance. But there is that kind of like cool, tepid, like refreshing, watery quality to it that I really enjoy in the form of that like 90s aquatic accord that's going on in it. Really unexpected citrus fragrance, and something I think is, I won't say underrated. It's like a bestseller for the brand, but really beautiful and really worthy of praise, like serious praise. That's another thing that we wanted to challenge in this video, I think, is that citrus perfumes are taken for granted, and they might not be seen as like the high art version of fragrance. But I think there's something very artistic about all of the picks that we've brought here today, and especially Clementine, California.
Great choice. Yeah, and it's one I have smelled, and yeah, you're right. I like Sydney Rock Pool, and I do also like that one. So I do think they're quite different, and like you say, very citrus forward in this one. But yeah, that kind of holiday relaxation feel is a common thread to both, isn't it? I'm going to take that relaxation and move it slightly towards sick day, in a nice way though. So my first pick is a remarkable fragrance called Honey and Lemon by J Scent. Now, I was excited to try J Scent, given the sort of hugely glowing reviews that both yourself and John had given them for various fragrances. And Honey and Lemon is just, it's so fun. It smells like honey and lemon cough sweets. It smells like if you got a teaspoon of honey and put it in a cup, mixed it with some hot water, and then put some lemon juice in it when you were poorly. It smells like that. Now, you might think that having those associations would make it a slightly depressing fragrance, but it's not at all. It manages to circumvent that potential pitfall somehow by being really quite joyful. The lemon, I too sprayed this ages ago, and I can still smell the honey. Particularly, the honey is really beefy in this. Not as in it smells beefy, but that it is really strong. Because honey can skew weirdly, can't it? It can go a little bit urinous at times.
It certainly can.
This is a sweet crystally honey. Really, really nice. If you like honey perfumes, this is a must try. And then that sweetness, that sugariness is just sliced through by the lemon. And the lemon is just so lemony, and it's so vivacious, and it feels like it might be quite simple. There are only really those two components to it. There are other things listed, but those are what you're smelling. On the blotter that it's been on for a good couple of hours, it is still super strong. I do also get a slightly woodiness as well. But it's just such a fun fragrance. It's just such a happy, upbeat fragrance that I couldn't not include it. And also, I feel like it is a really unusual take on citrus, because it's so muscly, and it goes and goes and goes. And yeah, it kind of takes inspiration from something that we might see in the everyday, like a kind of honey and lemon cough sweet, and makes it new again. So yeah, it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth a sniff if you like honey and lemon cough sweets, for sure.
Yeah, that house too, J Scent, amazing house, and I'm really glad that you liked them as much as I thought you might. They do this thing where they combine like a sense of like photo realness in their sense with something a little bit more abstract and charming, like they're making a little storybook, but the illustrations in the book are really detailed, right? So they're really excellent at combining like the abstract with the photo real. And in this case, like you said, it's like that real honey and that real lemony quality that you like about it. And I think in another one of their scents, a similar formula is employed. Their green tea scent, where I mean they list like a peanut note. They list, green tea, of course, and some other complementary materials, but it's so realistic in its like green tea-ness, right? And I think that that's something that they do very well. Um, I have endless amounts of fun sniffing my way through their stuff, so I'm very happy that you're enjoying them too.
Yeah, it is. It's a great scent. It really made me smile when I smelt it, because I was like, that just smells like onion lemon. Does what it says on the tin.
So another scent from my picks. So I think I'll probably talk about this one next because it has sort of a tie-in with the last. And the scent is Latrogue Aqua from Arquiste. We mentioned this a couple weeks ago. So Latrogue Aqua, like Clementine, California, has a aquatic bent, and as the name would imply, there is something aqua about it. But where Clementine, California smells like aquatic cologne, like dihydromercenol, old school aquatic cologne, I think Latrogue Aqua takes a more like natural approach to wateriness. It's like dewiness. It's like the texture of water, if that makes any sense whatsoever. It probably sounds a little absurd, um, but it's like blowing bubbles underwater and then like splashing stream water in your face. It's like it's got like the texture of water, and what I mean by that, you smell wet, right? And it's not something that that water has a scent as much as it has a um a dewiness, like a texture, like condensation, right? And the brilliant thing here is that it's combined with citrus. In this case, it's the citron fruit, which I'm actually not terribly familiar with. I think those who are inexperienced with citron might smell more of like the lemon accord in this, because lemon and bergamot are also listed, and those are a little bit more familiar, I think, for more people who are into citrus fragrances. Lemon and bergamot are very often used. So there's like this transparent, easygoing floralcy that's going on here too. I think it's a myrtle flower accord being used here. But the real brilliance of it, is like that kind of textural wateriness. And, citrus is special because, it can go in this like sharp, citric direction where it's like very bracing and very sour. And citrus can also be very fruity and very sweet, right? It can be very, bubbly and happy and sweet. Here, though, it sort of displays another quality of it where it's like, citrus can have like a cooling, um, meditative effect on a blend if it's utilized correctly. It can be like this thing where you are relaxed because you have citrus on, right? And that I don't think that's something that we're used to thinking about in terms of citrus. I think we're always associating it with like bright high energy, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that there's something meditative about the textural element of wateriness when paired with citron in Latrogue Aqua.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, I think Arquiste do interesting takes on things, and interesting takes on sort of perfume standards. So I'm really glad you brought this one. And yeah, and I like that there's that relaxed element in there too, which I'm going to build on for my next citrus pick, which is Stella by Tocca. Now, I literally just opened, this is my backup bottle, that I had, my second bottle of this, which is really like sweet little box. And I mean, firstly, look how gorgeous the packaging is of that. It's like this kind of very tactile bottle. Relatively inexpensive for fragrance, actually, of any type, particularly for anything that might be considered niche fragrance. I think that was about £50 to £60. I bought it. I've had it sort of in reserve for a while because I've been finishing another bottle off, and I wanted to open my fresh one for today. Now, this is orange, which I do find, or rather in the orange that I've smelled rendered in fragrance tends to be softer and more relaxing than, say, the lemon or the yuzu. Well, let's take bergamot out of the equation because, like you say, it's in everything. And this is a particularly soft, diffuse, really cozy, really soothing orange. It has a real, you definitely get orange in the start when you spray it. There's no mistaking that it's orange. And then, again, been sprayed on strip, good couple of hours. It sort of sinks into a white musk, sandalwood, sweeter, maybe even some vanilla in there, kind of sweeter, sumptuous base, but that's not heavy. It's quite pillowy feeling still. Yeah, I mean that's what this is. It's an orange balanced on a pillow. That's my metaphor for this scent. But it's lovely, and I find it it's a very comforting fragrance. It's a fragrance that I like to wear if I'm ever feeling a bit sad or a bit like I need a quiet day. It's that sort of scent. It's just lovely. It's defying kind of being pinned down by words, other than to say it's just really nice. It's a dreamy citrus. It's an ethereal citrus. It's a kind of sleepy sort of citrus. It lacks that sharp metallic sourness that a lot of citruses can have. This is the sort of citrus that looks after you, that's your best friend, rather than something that pushes you to go skydiving. But yeah, super scent. Really like this one. Like it enough for this to be my second bottle.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah. Knowing that we both, are smelling all kinds of things all the time, never mind the fact that we have large collections, like that must be quite, a feat to get through a couple of bottles of something like that. That's awesome. So my last main pick was Yuzu ab Irato from Pierre Guillaume, because we had to pick a Pierre Guillaume. It's us chatting. So, okay. Knowing us, it's probably something that we've mentioned on the pod before in that respect, but I wanted to mention it here because not only is its subject note of Yuzu quite gorgeous, I just think that because this perfume diverts away from the other two citruses I brought today, it might be an appropriate way to round out my group. So where the other two that I mentioned are, piquant and juicy, yet also, watery and full of texture, Yuzu ab Irato is also full of texture, but a very different kind. There's something more, dare I say, powdery, but lightly so, resembling something that you might find in a skin or hair product, especially one that's, well stocked in an upper crust salon or a spa. And it plays on Yuzu citrus's inherent herbaceousness. And this is something that's literally true. It's an interesting extraction in perfumery when you encounter natural Yuzu, because, when you smell a Yuzu oil, you get, the citrus, that kind of bergamot lemon kind of quality, but then you are also entreated to this, haze of floral herbaceousness. It's a very fascinatingly complex material. So, Yuzu ab Irato uses that to its advantage and kind of builds off of the herbaceousness with other herbs, and thyme is noticeable here. And then it has this powdered, starchy kind of, I don't want to say fougere because it's not really a combination of moss and coumarin as much as it's just sort of a clean, handsome, masculine kind of smell. In the background, it's not really at the forefront of the perfume as much as the citric quality of it is, but it's there. And it, obviously, bergamot specifically, but citrus in general plays a huge role in the fougere quality of fragrances, the fougere category, I should say. So here it's almost like a fougere, but not. It's almost like a citrus, but more complex. It's almost like an eau de cologne because it has, the citrusiness, the herbaceousness, but it doesn't have that, that orange flower kind of quality. Instead, the floral used here once again is myrtle. So I'm noticing, that kind of comparison with Latrobe Aqua, which also utilizes a myrtle note. So I guess what I'm discovering is I like semi-aquatic, semi-herbaceous, myrtle flower infused citrus perfumes. Sort of a very specific route for me to take, but it really works very well. And Yuzu Apparato does what the others don't, insofar as it has like a darker edge to it, has like a grainier texture than the others, a slightly more powdery, kind of more substantive texture than the other two. And just like a beautifully handsome quality about it. So, I think all of these picks, really display a wide variety of ways to use citrus. And we haven't even, scratched the surface of what citruses can do. Do you have any other picks, Nicola?
Yeah, so my last main pick is Costiera, which is by Gritti Venetia. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, this is a brand I've been recently getting to know, and I've found a lot to like, actually, and they've got quite a vast collection. I've found quite a lot to like. So this sample has got in it bergamot, orange, and rosemary. So we're getting that kind of herb in there to kind of give that citrus some ping. And then floral bouquet, C notes, lemon blossom rather than orange blossom, which I thought was worth kind of noting. And then that's on a base of sandalwood, amber, and vanilla. Now, this for me, I think you'd actually probably really like this. It has that fresh sea quality to it, and on the blotter having been sprayed, a good couple of hours ago, it's that marine quality that comes across, sort of salty, briny water, and the sandalwood in it smells a bit driftwoody. Particularly now it's had such a long time to evaporate off the stick, but there's still definitely a lot of scent still there. It's still very noticeable. It's a very clean smelling fragrance. At the start, when you spray it, the rosemary does give the citrus that lift. It gives it a bit of zing. It gives it a bit of an almost a counterpoint to give some light and shadow to the composition. And then the C notes with the lemon blossom and the floral bouquet, just kind of generic florals. I don't get. I do get the florals. I get a sort of, but they're almost like impressionistic in the way that they appear. With the main thrust of the fragrance at that point being partly the citrus and then partly the seawater coming through. And then that stays for me with a slightly damp woodiness coming through as well into the base. I don't get, when you see amber, sandalwood, and vanilla, you think, oh, that's going to be really sweet and milky, perhaps. It's not here. It's it's kind of almost like a driftwoody feeling. But it's a very nice, very easy to wear scent that I think a lot of people would be able to quite comfortably wear. And also for a lot of different occasions, I think it is the sort of thing that you could wear very easily to the office, very easily to a night out. And one of the things that I like about it is that it feels like the sort of fragrance that will contend with heat quite nicely. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, and one that I'm going to be wearing more, particularly as it gets hotter. But to speak to your previous point about, it's us chatting and there should be a Pierre Guillaume in there somewhere. I think if I was going to suggest to somebody that if they wanted to explore citrus, Pierre Guillaume might be one of the places that I would suggest to start, because obviously he released that trio of citruses, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, of which Morning into Passa is, I know, one of our shared favourites. There's Solsecchia as well, and a third one whose name, Grand Siècle, something like that. Is that it? Yeah, good. But then also things like Sensuality, which is a lemon blossomy type scent. Definitely has a citrus note in the top, but then goes into a very creamy, very suntan lotiony type sandalwood, which is a really interesting fragrance too. So I think you see a lot of the different facets of citrus represented and explored in his collection, which is, I think is really the mark of a good perfumer, like the ability to approach something from many different ways and make them all feel either fresh or like a really good example of its type. Really good kind of fulsome and satisfying example of its type. If it isn't something completely, wacky and novel and out of left field.
Absolutely, yeah. And so something that we had promised to do is to revisit these after some hours on the strip, and you've worked that into some of your discussion here. I figured I would just take a moment just to prove a point with them, and that is, smelling Latrobe Aqua has that yellow citrus quality that I described at the top that's much more, three-dimensional and bright. In the dry down, it does retain quite a bit of that too. But instead, it kind of leans into that tepid water kind of feel and sort of like the smell of a hazy afternoon. You know what I mean? That kind of general landscaped smell. Clementine, California, the first pick that I brought, starts to lean more into its sweeter herbaceousness with that, that cypress note and those juniper berries, etc. And then Yuzu Abarato, definitely darker herbs and a sense of, powdery textures involved going on there. I want to note that all three of them still have a good bit of citrus left in them. The citrus is still fighting and throwing itself into the party here, albeit in a less defined and a less three-dimensional way. So I guess, the big takeaway for me is that I think that we shouldn't just think about citruses as something that begins a fragrance. They add a diversity of nuance to them as well. Without citruses, the entire profile of something, like I said before, like a fougere or like the entire profile of even a chypre would be incomplete. So many different, contemporary subcategories of fragrance would be missing something if it wasn't for citruses. And it doesn't necessarily have everything to do with the start of a perfume. It can be the beginning and ending stages of them as well.
So over to you, Fragrantica listeners and viewers. What are your favourite citruses? And, what do you look for when you're picking a citrus scent? Is it that lively start, or is it something that resonates right the way through and sets the tone for the whole perfume? Please do let us know in the comments.